Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to allow everyone to enter the room and we will begin momentarily. Good morning and thank you for joining today's program. In Solidarity and Strength is a webinar series launched by the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles to support the Jewish community during this historic crisis. Today's webinar is The Power of Allyship, Fostering Resilient Community Through Friendship, Education, and Dialogue. We invite you to submit questions through this morning's conversation using the webinar's Q&A function, and our moderator will direct them to today's panelists. Please welcome our moderator for today's conversation, Mary Kohav, the Vice President of DEI and Community Engagement at the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being with us today as we cover a topic of allyship, which is really top of mind for our community. Our community is confronting escalating levels of hatred online, on campuses, and paired with processing the impact of war, trauma, violence, and disinformation. Today's conversation will engage our panelists in informed dialogue with us around the power of allyship. Allyship comes in all forms, through partnership, awareness, legislation, standing up against hate, and more. And we're here today with community leaders who I'll introduce in a moment, who have been allies to the Jewish community and who are here to share with us their knowledge and best practices around fostering it. Allyship has deep roots in the Jewish tradition, reflecting a commitment to justice, compassion, and responsibility. The concept is intertwined with the principle of tikkun olam, meaning repairing the world. From biblical narratives emphasizing the ethical treatment of others to teachings in our texts encouraging acts of kindness, Judaism underscores the importance of standing in solidarity with those facing injustice. Today's panel ties well with our ongoing community engagement pillar of bridge building, civic partnership, and interfaith work that brings about allyship between our federation and other communities in Los Angeles. And I just want to share a little bit about each of these programs briefly. Through our Civic Partnerships program, we connect with nonprofit organizations in LA that have demonstrated success in addressing and repairing systemic inequities. We recently hosted an event with one of our partners, the Brotherhood Crusade in LA County versus Hate, focused on education and combating hatred geared toward teens. Through another program, our United Leaders Project, we convene civic leaders from diverse racial, faith, and cultural backgrounds across Los Angeles for a year-long leadership training program aimed at fostering professional growth and bridge building. And through this program, we play a significant role in strengthening the civic landscape of Los Angeles. We also have been doing vital work for interfaith relations. Our annual Interfaith Passover Freedom Seder brings together leaders and community members from all faiths and backgrounds to engage in an evening of conversation and tradition, sharing the ritual of Passover and discussing its themes of freedom and equality for all. Without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our panelists today. We have Capri Maddox with us, Executive Director of the Los Angeles Civil and Human Rights and Equity Department. Thank you, Capri, for all of your visionary work with everything from LA for All to just yesterday convening a civil rights enforcement roundtable with Jewish community leaders to assure us that you're doing what you can to keep our community safe. I'm also honored to have with us Cameron Kansarinia, who's the Vice President of the National Union for Democracy in Iran. We were so grateful to be able to partner with you around our work on the Women, Life, Freedom campaign, and we thank you for your solidarity. I'm also honored to have with us California Assemblymember Evan Lowe. Thank you so much for expressing your solidarity, showing up for your community, and really gracefully inviting us to be in community with you, which we have really enjoyed and gained so much from. And last but not least, Sunitha Menon, Managing Director of operations at Equality California. We're so happy to have you as a civic partner this year, and we have just enjoyed getting to know your organization and working alongside with you to execute on great programs. I'd love to just now hand it over to our panelists to each introduce themselves, share their connection to the Jewish community, and to share a moment when they or their community felt supported by others in a moment of allyship. And we'll go start with Capri, and then we'll go to Evan, and then Sunitha, and then Cameron.
All right. Well, greetings. I'm so honored to be here and to share space with all of you. Of course, running the Civil Rights Department, being the founding executive director, we fight hate and discrimination on all fronts. We also fight injustices and inequities. We can even bring cases against folks that violate your civil rights in the areas of commerce, education, employment, and housing. But what we do is to fight hate and discrimination is one thing. The thing that I think is important to share right now is the connections that we have. And allyship really means standing up for humanity, and it means standing up through thick and thin. And I think we also know that it's important to not just stand up with folks when the world is falling down. We need to stand together and to be united in good times and bad. And I think the work that the Jewish Federation is doing on a regular basis, being out, being open, inviting folks to seders and celebrations that happen in the Jewish community make Los Angeles better. And allyship means sending a strong message to the world that when you come for one of us, you come for all of us, and that we are coming together. One thing I want to say about my connections to the Jewish community, of course, some of you may remember my previous job. I was Mike Feuer's Special Assistant City Attorney. And the reason I think we had a connection is I worked at Bet Zedek Legal Services right after he left to go do this thing called being a politician, and very, very grateful for his service. And the other connection that I have is I'm a proud alum of Fairfax High, and all of the Jewish community supported me, including many of my teachers, Dr. Victor and others at Fairfax High. So as it relates to the community, I feel strong connections. And the thing that I want to say, I'm a member of First AME Church, and we have a sister temple, Temple Isaiah, and I just want to shout them out today as we finish these introductions. So thank you so much for having me. It's a joy and a pleasure to be here and stand with you in solidarity through thick and thin.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And we'll now turn it over to Assembly Member Evan Lowe.
Thank you so very much, Mary, and good to see everyone here. Thanks to JFIT for allowing for us to have dialogue, and these incredible 74 participants who've also taken time out of your busy schedules to join in conversations about how to be activated. I'm going to make an assumption, though, that many are here because we understand the importance of coalition building and solidarity, but how do we expand in making sure that we're getting more to embody and help advocate in these ways, especially in these times too. But I appreciate the comments, Capri, and I wish I had a vivacious, bright background that she does here too. But unfortunately, I'm in the Bay Area currently, and it's a little foggy and overcast now too. But I'm so delighted to be able to be in this conversation. I serve in the California State Legislature representing Silicon Valley, and I also chair the California Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus. And we used to talk about the importance, and we used to make actual jokes in a fun way about the solidarity and the commonality between that of the Chinese and Jewish communities. But all joking aside, when we take a look at the important aspects of stopping Asian hate and anti-Semitism, the uncanny parallels that exist, we see this front and center. And so when we're thinking about policies to be able to be in these positions, it's very important. And similarly, when we think about the opportunities that exist, about the lived experiences for the Asian Pacific Islander community, what must we do in demonstrating that on policy arenas too? And so I'm proud of this opportunity for this conversation and this dialogue. But most importantly, just as we have these introductory remarks, how do we create additional spaces for individuals to be activated? There are so many who share in empathy and in grace, but don't maybe know quite how to be activated, how to participate, how to lend out that hand. And again, that goes to show, thank you very much for JFED and so many others to allow for this conversation in trying to getting others who may not be political, who may not have previous experience in political or civic engagement, but also are decent human beings. So let's provide opportunities for them. And I look forward to this dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sunitha, would you like to just share about the question?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you all for being here today, and Mary and team for putting this together. I'm sure there's a ton of work that went into it on the back end. So for all the people that don't generally get thanked, thank you so much for that. My name is Sunitha Menon. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Managing Director of Operations at Equality California. For those of you who don't know, Equality California is the nation's largest statewide LGBTQ plus civil rights organization. And currently, we're California's only LGBTQ plus civil rights organization that works at the local, state, and national level. So what we actually do is we work to bring the voices of LGBTQ plus people and allies to institutions of power in California. Very excited. We are a huge fan of Evan Lowe, so thank you, Assembly Member, for all of your work. And our overall mission is to create a world that is healthy, just, and fully equal for all LGBTQ plus people. So if you're interested in learning more, please don't hesitate to reach out to me after this. But a little bit about myself. My dad is from India. My mom is from Romania. My mom is Jewish, and her family left Romania escaping religious persecution. And actually, the Jewish Federation is the organization that brought my family over to the United States. So I have a very deep history of partnership and love and support for the Jewish Federation. And I've really appreciated how the conversations have been really open and aware of the complexities of these issues. And so for me, you know, my allyship with the Jewish community is in my soul. And it is something that for me, I'm constantly working to think about the different intersections of my life and how they impact different communities and how we can really uplift and support all of the communities out there. I remember after 9/11, I was targeted because people thought that, you know, I was a terrorist. Recently, things have been really difficult as somebody that is Jewish. And so for me, I'm constantly thinking about how are we looking at these situations, uplifting ourselves and supporting each other in the complexities of this, and really being comfortable with discomfort and saying we might have really opposing views, and that's okay. But how do we get to a place where we are moving the needle in the right direction? And so really grateful to be here today. And I will turn it back over to you, Mary.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Sunitha. And I can definitely relate being both Iranian and Jewish with some of your experiences that you just shared. And along those lines, I'm really honored to introduce Cameron Consarinia to share his remarks about this question around allyship and what it looks like.
Well, thank you so much, Mary. Thank you to JFED for hosting this important conversation, and I'm pleased to be here with the rest of these distinguished speakers. My name is Cameron Consarinia. I'm the Vice President of the National Union for Democracy in Iran, NUFTI. NUFTI is the nation's premier Iranian-American organization focusing on human rights and democracy. And of course, I'm in Washington, D.C. right now, where our organization is based. But like so many Iranian Americans and Iranians, I'm really a lifelong Californian, having grown up in Southern California, looking forward to being back there with my family for the holidays and hopefully meeting so many of you in person. And being Californians, particularly if you're Angelenos, you're likely very familiar with the Iranian American community, which since 1979 has been a significant population in Southern California and in California more broadly, and really across the country, and a significant subset of the Iranian American community, of the Iranian diaspora, and of Iranians as a whole is our Iranian Jewish community, Mary, as you know well, and particularly in Southern California. And so for us Iranian Americans, our connection to people of the Jewish faith is not only with our fellow Americans who are Jewish, but with Iranian American Jews who have lived in Iran for thousands of years. And here today we're talking about allyship and how we can support one another, and unfortunately how to overcome hate. And hate and hatred is something that regrettably Iranians are all too familiar with after 1979 and the establishment of the Islamic dictatorship in Iran. And our Jewish friends are unfortunately particularly familiar, as are women, with hate and hatred that they've been forced to live with in Iran since 1979. When the Islamic Revolution occurred in 1979, two of its first victims were women and our Jewish friends. And the very first law that the new regime in Iran changed was what had previously been the family protection laws. And they effectively immediately made women second-class citizens, removed their right to hold many jobs, including government postings, judgeships, removed their right to study many fields of study in universities, lowered the marriage age from 18 years old to 9 years old, effectively institutionalizing the practice of rape in Iran as a legal one. And a very similar thing happened to the Jewish community in Iran. Iran once had the largest Jewish community anywhere outside of Israel in the Middle East. And unfortunately, that population has effectively been faced with a state-backed ethnic cleansing, and more than 90% of the Iranian Jewish community was forced to flee the country since 1979. And so our community is sadly all too familiar with this. But in times like this, it draws us closer to other communities, the Iranian American Jewish community, the Jewish community more broadly, and other minority communities here in the United States. And so that's why conversations like this are so important. And I'm thrilled to be part of it. And on behalf of our organization and Iranian Americans, we thank JFED for the important work that you all are doing. And we're thankful for the reciprocal allyship and support that JFED and so many others, particularly so many Californians, showed last year when you may recall that 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, the young Iranian woman, was murdered by the state in Iran simply for showing her hair, not even all of her hair, just too much of her hair for the regime's morality police. And in the aftermath of her state murder, Iranians took to the streets in cities across the country, and they were quickly backed up by allies abroad. We saw so many of our Jewish friends and so many Californians partake in protests in support of the Iranian people and their aspirations for a secular democracy. And so that allyship has meant an immense amount to Iranian Americans. And I know even back home in Iran, it's meant an immense amount to them. So I'd like on their behalf to thank all of those who showed their support. And we need more of it going forward. So I'm very pleased to be here today, and thank you again.
I just want to share that, this conversation just really hits home. Not only have you all just shared some really important history, important realities about intersectionality, and as Capri said, and as Cameron sort of echoed, when they come for one, they come for all. And I just want to really acknowledge that being able to have these kinds of conversations, the fact that we all know each other and we have had a relationship and we're able to sort of take this to the next level is really, in my world, a key part of fostering allyship. So thank you so much. I'm now going to just ask a few individual questions. I'll start with Assembly Member Evan Lowe. You've just been such a champion of fostering allyship. It's just, you almost live and breathe it. And I would love for you to just share with us a little bit about what it looks like to you. What's your approach, and why do you, how is it beneficial to you and your community and beyond?
Thank you, Mary. When we talk about, you just said, how does it make sense to your community? And this is frankly about humanity for all of us. And I know that you share that as well too, but I would oftentimes talk about how when we think about the normal calendaring events and moments in time for us to engage, be on MLK Day and a day of service, recognizing the importance of this, marching with Black Lives, during the protests and acknowledging the disparities and inequities that exist. The month of March for Women's History Month, and we do a women's march, and I would join in solidarity for that. There would be marches for June as LGBT Pride Month, and marching across the globe for different pride marches and recognizing the importance of what this means. Being at protests and sit-ins also with those who are undocumented and farm workers as well too. Similarly, also during the Muslim ban, I went with our state treasurer, Fiona Ma, and we just showed up and during the Muslim ban, showed up at San Francisco airport and protested Islamophobia. And I recall people asking, why is it that we engage in these ways and why so active? And, history is very important, Mary. And as I was telling many in the Chinese and Asian American community about the importance of solidarity, I said, let's remember our history. And this was in the context of the Muslim ban. And I said, if we remember our American history, in 1882, there was something called the Chinese Exclusion Act, which prohibited migration from a particular geographic region to the United States. And that would be unfathomable in this day and age. Like, that's 1882. That makes no sense. That was wrong then, it's wrong now. And of course, you fast forward to where we are today, that exactly just happened in our lifetimes. The Muslim ban exactly emulated that same policy. And when we think again, the uncanny parallels are want to be a broken record on this, because we can all share in these experiences. Or whether or not we remember the alien land law in California. The California alien land law in 1912 prohibited individuals that looked like me from owning property. And we're seeing these pieces of legislation being introduced in this day and age right now. And that's why it's important when we think about there was a moment in time when I would actually scratch my head and say, boy, when I went to the Women's March, when I went to Black Lives, when I went to Pride marches, I didn't really honestly see that many members of my AAPI community in mass, in numbers. And I scratched my head and I said, what does the AAPI community stand for? In other words, what is our march? What is it that we go on the streets and march for, in which you're seeing the majority of Asian Americans on there? And part of that challenge is that there are some cultural norms that doesn't necessarily fit. That the stereotype anyway of Asian Americans is that we are more quiet. We are seen as a model minority. We don't like to rub feathers. We don't go on the streets. We ask politely, and all these things. But you realize in this day and age that the solidarity about what we're talking about is very important. And so that's where I think I lend a hand out to those in all communities, especially in this moment of difficult times of anti-Semitism and hate for all communities, that those that are on this panel represent various communities in which we can all share it in these lived experiences, and also recognizing this moment in time for us to lean in and bring other members of our community, which oftentimes is difficult because when we're talking about these issues, oftentimes there can be clashes. Even within the own AAPI community, there are clashes, much less when we're talking about other cultures as well. So it takes a deep sense of grace and empathy, which reaffirms the importance of the Jewish Federation convening conversations like this and lending hands to other communities as well.
Thank you so much for those remarks. One thing that echoed for me is, as you talked about sort of how your community shows up and the differences, I think that it's important to note that allyship looks different to different communities. And I think that we want to really unpack all the different ways that allyship can show up, but also how we as Jewish community members can think about fostering it. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of a recipe. And I think that because of the complexity of our different communities, allyship can show up in different ways. And along those lines, Sunitha, Equality California has just done an incredible job at fostering allyship. And I'd love to hear from you, what's your recipe for success, but also what have been some challenges and how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And thank you for saying Equality California has done an excellent job fostering relationships. I think we have, and I think, we've been around for 25 years, but for me, the recipe for success is not looking at the successes. It's looking at the communities that don't feel like we represent them. It's really looking into where are the spaces where the LGBTQ plus community feels like we're falling short, or we're not, we're not uplifting their message or what they need. I joined Equality California in August of last year, so it's been a little bit over a year. And my primary mission has been diversifying the organization internally and externally. So how are we making sure that we have the most diverse staff that can really help us understand the complexities of the LGBTQ plus community? Yes, I am Jewish. Yes, I am Indian. Yes, I am first generation. Yes, I am queer. But that doesn't mean that I know what all LGBT Jewish people need or all Indian LGBTQ plus people need. So for me, what I'm kind of constantly looking to push the organization to do is to get out into the community, talk to people that maybe we haven't had great relationships with, or communities again that have said, you know what, that you all are great at certain things, but we don't feel represented by you, and figure out how we can build those relationships and support those communities. So for me, the recipe to success is really looking at the places where maybe you're not doing a good job, or maybe where there have been tension between your organization and another organization, and saying, how do we build this bridge together? How do we say, we know that 2024 is going to be absolutely bananas with the election. So how do we truly come together and say, how are we doing this? How are we supporting each other? How am I helping, Capri with you and your mission, and Cameron and Evan and Mary with what you all are doing? And how organizationally are we doing that? I think another really important thing when it comes to allyship is realizing where you take the lead and where you support. Because if you try to take the lead in an area that is not your area, it's going to come back on you. And so for me, a lot of the conversations I've been having with the senior leadership team and the organization are really that, like, what is our area of expertise? What do we own? And then what do we say, you know what, we're going to join on and support this other organization who already knows what they're doing. And to me, that means all aspects of our programming. That means when I meet with our grants team, if we find a grant that I think should go to a smaller organization that doesn't have an awesome grants department that can take all the time to write a grant, we pass it along to that organization. So to me, it really is building that community connection and making sure that organizations, communities, and folks out there know that we care and we really want to be doing a good job. And if we fall short, please let us know so we can improve. So I think a lot of it is about humility and really looking at not focusing constantly on success, but focusing on growth and evolution.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And those best practices are really important to think about for all of us who are in positions of community leadership and beyond. Thank you. Cameron, I'd love to hear from you a little bit more about the strong allyship between your organization and organizations like yours and Israel at this time. And tell us about this. How has this allyship been beneficial? I know it's a huge question and we could probably do a whole webinar on it, but I want to hear about it in the context of this conversation.
Sure. First, I'd just like to say, to Sunita that any grants that she has, feel free and send them our way. Nufti will take any and all grants. So I'm glad you offered it. We're gonna take you up on it. Mary, as I said earlier, the connection between the Iranian community and the Jewish community has really significant roots in Iran. But one of the other panelists, perhaps it was Capri, forgive me, mentioned her church and the connection they have with Temple Isaiah, I believe. There's also a really significant religious connection and really a biblical connection between the Iranian people and the Jewish people. And that is that King Cyrus, or Cyrus the Great, one of the first Persian kings, is mentioned more than any other person in the Bible who's not a prophet, who's not Jesus. And this is the Old Testament and the New Testament. And so there's a real significant historical connection between the Iranian people and the Jewish people. Queen Esther, for example, in addition to King Cyrus. And so these are not things that go away over time. They're things that are really well known to Iranians and are really sort of baked into them from an early age, and the importance of recognizing one's history and where one comes from and one's traditions. And in Iran, that tradition has really been one of peaceful coexistence. Iran is an extremely diverse country, linguistically, religiously, tribally, and in so many other ways. And thankfully, in unlike, unfortunately, other countries in the Middle East, those different groups have lived side by side in really relative peace and coexistence, and even more than that, in brotherhood, I would say, for thousands of years. And so that allyship, maybe allyship is a new term, but it's something that has existed more viscerally in Iran for thousands of years, going back again to those biblical times. And that's something that Iranians carry forward to today. And immediately after the terrorist attack of October 7th, you saw Iranians inside the country expressing their solidarity with the victims. One recurring image that we see coming out of Iran is the dictatorship there, putting the American flag and the Israeli flag, and often sometimes the British flag or those of other Western countries, on the ground in the doorway of public buildings, schools, government buildings, hospitals, thoroughfares that are commonly passed in an attempt to force people to step on those flags and desecrate the flags. And we have seen thousands of these videos come out of Iran, of Iranians of all walks of life, all backgrounds, all ages, all sexualities, everything, jumping over those flags or stepping around them and refusing to step on the flag of any country and desecrate it, because Iranians are inherently a peace-seeking people, and irrespective of what their political differences may be with one government or another, would never seek to desecrate another country's flag. And so this really is something that's deep-seated for Iranians, and I think it's particularly important to them today and in the past 44 years, because as I said earlier, they've been forced to live under a regime that has attempted to take even their most fundamental rights. Women, as I said, are treated as second-class citizens in Iran. You're only allowed to be one of 3 or 4 religions. You're only allowed to be one of 3 or 4 religions. I mean, it's a concept that even saying it, I do this work every day, but every time I say it, I say to myself, am I saying that right? Is that really true? You're only allowed to be one of a few religions? And yeah, that's the law of the country. Unfortunately, under this regime. And so Iranians, I think, take particular pride in supporting others, in trying to be there for others, because it's something that they want for themselves in their fight for freedom and in their fight for democracy. And that's been the case not only inside the country, but in the Iranian diaspora. And you've seen in protests in recent weeks for peace against the terrorist attack, Iranians really show up in solidarity, again, because they themselves have been victims of something really indescribable. And so they recognize hate when they see it, and they know that it often doesn't stop with one group. In fact, it rarely does. And so they're trying to be there for others out of the goodness of their heart, but also in the hopes that others will be there for them in their fight.
I really appreciate so much you sharing a little bit about Cyrus the Great, who was known for his tremendous leadership. And having great leadership can really sow divides. It can, it can build tolerance. It can build an inclusive and perhaps even a loving society. And great nations flourish under that type of leadership. And I think it's really important for us to expect more from our leaders. And along those lines, I'd like to turn it over to Capri, who's actually just been an incredible leader with her LA for All program. You're able to really tap into that need for tolerance and inclusivity, and really looking and seeing the humanity in one another and loving one another. But I know that it's not an easy job. And so I wanted to ask if you could share a little bit about what happens when allies or people that you're in support of have competing goals. How do you navigate that terrain, and how can you hold multiple truths while meeting the needs of the communities that you serve in Los Angeles?
Well, thank you so much for that question, Mary. And by the way, such a great honor to be here with these esteemed panelists. And one of our panelists said earlier, we were repairing the world. I don't know if it was Cameron. But I think it's important to know that when you're tasked with fighting hate and discrimination and injustices and inequities in Los Angeles, that, has the #1, population outside of many people's home countries, it's a lot. And I find the strength to make sure that we serve all communities, because so many communities have poured into me personally as an Angelino, Again, mentioned that I'm a local gal, Fairfax High, et cetera. And I want you to know that when we think about how people come together, I do struggle at times when people play what I call the oppression Olympics. And, I could pick any group that's on this call or not. And even my community, I love that someone said it, even in their own community, I think it was Assembly member, even in my community, sometimes I get pushback. And by the way, it was good for me to see you, Mary, at the Brotherhood Crusade dinner Friday night. But it's important to know that when we started this department, the API hate was soaring. So this is a new department, 2020. And so then we went all in on API hate. It really scared me a great deal, because when you think about government sponsored hate, hate that's coming from elected leaders. And at that time, that's where a lot of that energy was coming from. It was terrifying. So we were all in on it. And then of course, I got pushback from my community, other communities. They're like, well, the stats about hate and discrimination are highest in these communities. And then you say, okay, well, we're going to run over here and make sure that you feel the love. And then it's like, some people have the largest population. Some people have been #1 in hate crime since the ADL's been keeping records. And big shout out to Jeff for coming with us yesterday at an event that Jamana Siyasaba from our team put together. But I want you to know that when all of that happens, and of course you go down the list and you realize, oh, well, what have you done for the disabled community, right? Those that are challenged with abilities, or the LGBTQ plus community. And of course, we have the Transgender Advisory Council in our department. So I want you to know that when we think about this, it's hard. It's like whack-a-mole. It's like hate whack-a-mole, because once something stops with one group, it starts again with another group. And I want you to know that it's important, because as many of our panelists have said, when they come for one of us, they're coming for all of us. And we have to come together, and we have to stay united, and I have to stay on point. So yes, a crisis is going to happen. A lot of times crisis may happen over holiday weekends. We had someone shot on President's Day weekend in February, 2 people shot President's weekend, February of this year. And, so it's not anything related to October. This is a constant thing that is happening with the Jewish community, but we activate all the time. And the thing is that I know, and our team, of course, with, Jamana Siyasaba, who is our expert on hate and extremism in our department, we know that if we don't shut hate down when it shows up against any community, we are all more vulnerable. So that's kind of how I keep it processed. And we're exhausted some days, but we're not ashamed. And we want to lift a better city, in a city that Mayor Bass, who just celebrated her 1-year anniversary yesterday, expects us to serve.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Capri. I appreciate your point also about the Oppression Olympics. I've written a little bit about, advocating for including the Jewish experience in DEI. And part of the reasoning behind that is, unless we unpack all of these hatreds and these forms of oppression, we're not really doing service to all of them, especially if we're thinking about people who identify as a Jew of color, who experience, really being marginalized from several different directions. And so, that's sort of a part of my position, is we want to learn more about anti-Semitism and the Jewish experience in DEI. But we have a question from the audience, and I'm just going to pose it and see if any of you would like to sort of take this one, which is there space to include more exploration of Israel's support for the LGBTQIA plus community in diversity education in the US? And how can this be a vehicle for bridge building? And I'll let you guys kind of think about who wants to take that on.
Nathan, do you want to take that? I can.
You can go first. I'll go after.
I want you to know that when it comes to standing with the LGBTQ plus community, we need to all come together in that space, as well as you may know, people that try to oppose any of the groups represented on this entire call. I'm talking about all the folks that are listening in as well. The LGBTQ plus community is a hot target. And that is why we are proud at LA Civil Rights to have the Transgender Advisory Council as a part of our department. And we have the LGBTQ plus representation for the entire city, the LGBTQ plus liaison for the entire city, Carla Ibarra, is represented in our department. She's one of our staff members and doing a fabulous job to lean in to make sure that the whole of government, and particularly those in City Hall, stand with the LGBTQ plus community. Big shout out to Tracy Park, who really steps up to make sure we have wonderful celebrations of Pride Month, and is always with us, helped us just a few weeks ago with the Transgender Day of Remembrance, when we honor and recognize all the people that were killed because of how they identify. So as far as LA City is concerned, we're standing in that space, and I think the Jewish community could help in these spaces by co-sponsoring some of our events that we have. When we think about Transgender Day of Remembrance, Pride Month, I believe it's around the same time as Jewish Heritage Month, but still, you know, we'll be out and we can be a force multiplier if the Jewish Fed, ADL, and others want to lean in the space. We can be a great portal with you.
Thank you so much. Sunitha, did you want to address that question at all?
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, as somebody, again, that has like a number of different aspects of intersectionality, I think the answer is absolutely yes. I think all DEI work is, the intention behind it is to encourage representation and participation of people of different genders, races, ethnicities, religions, all of those things. What that work should look like is how we are supporting our entire communities. And those entire communities are people that are made up of multiple different backgrounds and multiple different identities. And so for me, it's looking at the ways in which DEI work represents all communities that are held back, discriminated against, where there is hatred thrown towards them or at them, or things that are blamed on them. So for me, I absolutely think that it should. I think different communities will need to focus on different aspects of DEI work based on where they are in the country, where they are in the state, where they are in, you know, different areas, even in LA County, or I live in Long Beach, even in different areas of Long Beach. But I absolutely think that it should. And I think comprehensive DEI work does kind of a needs assessment of where is our community struggling and how do we approach this, which is also why I think DEI work is not a like one size fits all. Before I came to Equality California, I worked for RAIN, which is the nation's largest anti-sexual violence organization. And just a plug for them, they provide 24/7 support for anyone affected by sexual violence. So it's just rain.org, RAINN. And so to me, you know, when I was in that space, it was really looking at how DEI work supported survivors of sexual violence, which cross all communities. So I think when you're looking at your community, it's really doing a needs assessment and figuring out like who are the people that are discriminated against, who are the people that are held back, and how do we support them? I think certain communities are always included in that. I think the Jewish community, especially given what's happening now, does need some extra support.
Yes, would love to hear from the Assembly member.
Just to add, thank you very much, Mary, in acknowledging, addressing the question as well. There are a number of organizations, including an organization called the Wider Bridge, to help bring individuals to demonstrate the solidarity with the LGBT community in Israel. Of course, marriage equality and protections for members of our LGBTQ plus community are well represented and enjoyed in Israel, and in many places in the Middle East, it would actually be quite the contrary, to the extent of the death penalty. And so when we're thinking about the importance of, again, about solidarity, that is an important aspect. And I think we also are attempt to be intentional and careful about a wide cast of particular positions. There are many, of course, from many Muslim countries in which, as they are here, they individually and personally believe in the solidarity of marriage equality and protections for LGBT people. And so the nuance, again, about government policies and versus that of the people, this work in this space is delicate, but it is important also to acknowledge as well, too.
Well, thank you so much. I wanted to chime in a little bit, and then I'm going to share it back for final remarks from our speakers. But we have recently been leading a program called Shine a Light through our Hanukkah celebrations and in partnership with our Jewish Federations of North America. And we have created an allyship toolkit for members of the Jewish community with some guidance and links and resources on how they can lean into foster allyship with their peers in community with others around them, and what allyship can look like. And we'll be sharing that as a follow-up to this call. And I also just wanted to share that we're really excited to announce that our national partners have put a program together called Shabbat of Love, which is aimed at embracing the Jewish people to spread the love for who we are and to make more Jewish positive spaces. And it's going to encourage people of all ages and backgrounds to come together with each other to experience the sacredness of Shabbat and center Jewish pride and joy. And we'll be sharing a link to that as well in the chat. So we'll be following up with some of these best practices and tips, but I'd really love to sort of have final remarks from each of our speakers, sharing about maybe 2 or 3 key tangible tips that, you know, somebody who's listening here who might not have thought about it can reach out to some of their peers to say, you know, here's what I really need at this time, or ways to connect. And, you know, I think that, and just ways to be open. I will say, like, you know, allyship and people in my world have expressed allyship in so many surprising ways. And even the smallest gesture, I like to share with people that somebody offered me a prayer once at the end of a call. It was a blessing of safety. And it's just continued to give me strength and resilience in these difficult times. So I'll start with Cameron on this, and then we'll take it from there.
Mary, I want to thank you again for putting together this conversation, you and JFed, and wish you and all those celebrating Happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone here. I really appreciated what Capri said about not falling into the qualm of the oppression Olympics. It's really important. But with that in mind, my 2 takeaways for folks here are to read about what's happening inside Iran, to keep your mind on Iran, to read the news about what's happening in that country. Our organization continuously shares information about that, so you're more than welcome to go to our website or our social media feeds, because so much of what we have talked about here today, discrimination against different groups, hatreds toward people because of basic facets of their identity and simply who God made them as people. The work being done in California by you all is so important. The work being done across this country is critical. In Iran, unfortunately, that hatred, that discrimination takes on an even more potent aspect because, as Assemblymember Lowe said, it's state policy. What we're talking about in Iran is not social discrimination or prejudices that we can hopefully over time get rid of through education and things like that. With the important work that you all are doing, this is state sanctioned policy in Iran, and Iranians are fighting against it. They're fighting to free themselves from these draconian restrictions, from things that even didn't happen in the Spanish Inquisition or really anywhere else in history, going back to ancient times. And so I would ask you to continue to read about what's going on in Iran. This week we had a really absurd example that I think highlights just how fundamental the Iranian people's fight is, of a shopkeeper in a northern city of Iran, an elderly man who posted videos on social media of him dancing to songs, just silly songs, dancing. And he got over 100,000 followers on social media because people just needed a little bit of light in their lives with all this darkness. And he was arrested, and his social media account was taken over by the regime just for dancing. Dancing, singing are illegal in Iran. Women are banned from singing by the state. So these are things that are happening in that country, and Iranians take so much comfort, solace, and appreciation in the solidarity that those abroad show to them in their fight, because they really are empty-handed fighting a well-armed regime that is seeking to repress and control them in every way possible. So especially at this time of year, as we gather with our families and our loved ones, I would just ask that you continue to keep Iran on your mind, continue to follow the news, share with your friends, because some of the things that happen, being banned from singing and dancing, or being allowed to only choose one of a preset number of religions, are things that to us today just sound fake. I mean, I'm sure there are people listening to this who think that I'm making this up. Unfortunately, I'm not. It's true. And so as we gather with our families, as we think about how to support one another, to be better allies, I would just ask all of you to be thinking about the people of Iran and their struggle, particularly the women of Iran, and their fight for the most basic freedoms that we enjoy here. And once again, thank you to JFED, thank you, Mary, and thank you to these excellent panelists. It was my sincere honor to speak alongside you and to learn from you and the important work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for being with us. Capri, give us some tips. You're muted. Oh,
of course, someone has to do that every call. It's my turn. I want you to know that I've been delighted to share space with so many talented, dedicated folks that are on this panel today. I want to say as a takeaway is to know that I know it seems like whatever job I have, I always think like this is the most important thing in the world. But I believe that you've heard from Cameron, you've heard from, leaders from the state, et cetera. You know that hate and discrimination and inequities can change this world in ways that are delightful, that share the beautiful mosaic of Los Angeles, California, of the world, or it can take us, if we don't address these issues and if we don't stay on top of them and keep these issues top of mind, we can lose our democracy, our freedom. As Cameron mentioned, we can lose so much that we take for granted, and including our lives. And I know that we're in a time when everything is life and death, the economy is life or death, but I am telling you, as someone that takes on this fight regularly, and we were with the U.S. Attorney's Office yesterday, and some of the stories and information about plots that have been aborted and disrupted are really scary. And so we have to make sure that hate has no home in America, in this world, and it's going to take all of us. We can't rely only on Capri Maddox, Myra Medell, other people from the city to step up to make sure there is no hate. And although Mayor Bass is a force and our wonderful city council supports us, I'm letting you know that we need to be intentional, all of us, particularly in 2024. And of course, in the last days of 2023, we know what happened in October. We know that in just a split second, the world can just change. And you all have been living in the 2020s with me, so the world's changed a lot. So as for me and my household, we will serve the people of Los Angeles. So for our lane, we want to make sure that people know that you can go to LA is for everyone and learn about the work that we are doing, laisforeveryone.com, and it will take you into our website. You'll learn about our award-winning campaign. And the one thing that I want to say is we have a campaign in 21 languages, including sign language. We want to be intentional to let you all know that we'll send out the brochures and flyers to you and our posters in any language you request. And by the way, it's in Hebrew, even though 85% of people who speak Hebrew also speak English, because we wanted to send a message that when we say LA is for everyone, we mean our Jewish family as well. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us, Capri. I'll turn it over to Sunitha.
Excellent. Thanks so much. The social worker in me says to just ask the other people what they need. It really is. It is so easy to go into really tough situations with your own, this is how I can help, which is kind of problematic in a lot of ways. So to me, it's really how we go to the different organizations and say, what do you actually need that's helpful? What can I do that would be helpful in this moment for you? For our organization, that's really simple. We are a political organization, and 2024 is going to be bananas. If you go to our website and would like to volunteer, the biggest thing that we have been struggling with is getting folks to support at school board meetings. I've gone to school board meetings to literally help students go to the bathroom because they are scared because of the Proud Boys that are there. And so if there's ways you can volunteer, ways that you can get involved that are small, I know sometimes it can feel really difficult because these issues are so huge. They're really small things that you can do that make big differences. So for me, the kind of key thing that I always ask if someone or an organization is struggling is, do you need to just talk this out right now and have me listen, or are there things I can be doing to help you? Because sometimes people need that ear to really listen, and other times there are very clear things that you can do to help. So I know we only have 2 minutes left, so I will turn it over to, I believe, Assembly Member Lowe still has to go. Great.
Yes, thank you, Sunitha.
That's great. Thank you again for allowing the conversation to happen too. Of course, as the elected official on this call, I am biased, and I'm going to urge a call to action to run for office, seek out those appointments to boards and commissions, because there is no exception from being in these positions of influence, to help also demonstrate to the rest of the community that there is representation, and there is voice, and that government works for the people and is accessible as well too. And again, just as someone who was supposed to be a doctor, as a Chinese American, and not being a good Chinese boy, I was supposed to become a doctor like my father. And in the Asian culture, doing politics is not something that you really do. You're supposed to become doctors, lawyers, and engineers. But we realize the importance of seeking the opportunity to represent our communities now. So I hope that I can be example to say that this is not a cultural norm. It's not something that was ingrained in my upbringing, but rather we see this moment in time in which we must seize these opportunities, lend a hand, and be involved in our community. Because it's not going to be us. It's if we're not going to advocate for ourselves, let us not expect others to do so. But of course, we know that there are great individuals in our communities that also share in solidarity as well. So make sure that you seek and think about politics in a different way. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to Capri, Sunitha, Cameron, and Assembly Member Lowe for your time with us today around such an important topic that we know requires more conversation and more dialogue. All of you listening, please look for a follow-up email with additional resources, and please reach out to us if you'd like us. Many of you have asked to be connected with these leaders and these organizations, so please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to make those introductions. I wish everyone here a great rest of Hanukkah and an upcoming peaceful and healthy holiday season. Thank you so much.